Hi all, I have a very interesting and complex game to show you from the Sinquefield Cup 2015. Magnus Carlsen playing white against Wesley So. So this is in round 5. Let's see what happened. E4 for Magnus. Wesley So plays a Sicilian defense, no fear, a fighting response. Magnus Carlsen doesn't shy away in this game from the main line like he did in an earlier game against Topalov, which didn't work out that well in round 1. So yeah, he goes for an open Sicilian. So we have a classic Najdorf variation emerging. Bishop e3, e5, standard stuff, very well trodden path. Queen d2, b5. The strategic fight here is around the d5 square. White's trying to put more pressure on there to control against black's d5, which hems in the bishop at the moment. Also to try and dislodge pieces, maybe like kick a knight here, exchange off the bishop strategically to weaken that square. All these things. This big fight around that d5 square is a central feature here of this position. White castles queen side. Another idea quite often is that both sides are castling on the other wing, so White's going for a pawn storm later as well against the black king if black castles. Bishop e7, g4. It's dual purpose though here, not just for going for the king but also the d5 square if g5. But black now plays b4. Very timely, very precise time to play this. Now usually White kind of doesn't look forward to g5 now. He usually, in this position, let's connect to livebook and check, plays actually the move knight d5. You might think knight e2, but I think black, according to livebook, I think should be okay here in this position. Actually a5, and actually black's getting an equal position. It seems it's very, very sharp stuff. So another plan emerges for White actually. Instead of trying to control that square, to actually occupy it with a pawn. And you might think this is a bit weird, but it changes the pawn structure to give White a 3-2 pawn majority on the queen side and good queen side pressure. So after bishop takes d5, e takes. Although black has solved a piece occupying a nice outpost square, White does have this pawn majority now on the queen side. So the plans are a bit different. This b pawn is a bit risky to take with the king here, but it does seem to be a viable option. After knight b6, black is challenging this d5 pawn. A more dynamic approach is chosen here instead of queen takes b4, though it is a move, queen takes b4. A more dynamic approach, knight a5, which has been seen before. White is sacrificing a pawn here on d5, so again trying to get control over d5 and a blockade against black's d pawn to try and put more influence on the light squares in the position. So it's like a positional pawn sack. Does black dare take it? Well, if he doesn't, it seems a little bit unpleasant with things like knight c6 could be annoying in the future. So black does take that, and there's no way of winning a piece or anything here. Black's looking at that bishop, if g5 knight takes e3 is possible, and then actually, well, let's have a quick just check this out. And then I think if here, bishop takes f6 looks plausible because of bishop g5. So that nudge g5 I don't think is that significant. White just plays for pressure with knight c4, still willing to give up the bishop to get a grip, try and get an iron grip on the d5 square. Black does now take on e3, knight takes. So is it enough for a pawn? So it's like a positional pawn sack. Remember, it hems in the bishop. Control over this square hems in that bishop. Black castles. Now this grip, bishop c4. Black tries to be annoying to try and challenge these grippers of the d5 square with this knight maneuver. So go to b6, hits both d5 and c4. White now plays h4, and this is dual purpose actually. It's not just a hack and slay to open up files. Potentially in the endgame there can be dangerous lurking advanced pawns, very dangerous for queening later. We have a5, g5, and also immediately it looks as though something like g6 is scary, trying to rip open lines here using that pin. Black plays rook c8, and the bishop moves to d5, occupying d5, knight b6. King b1. White doesn't mind a nice knight on d5 here, even though it's pawn down. He's got such a grip on the position here, these two key light squares, and this space advantage emerging, increasing on the king side at the moment. Queen c7, and now rook hf1, so keeping a kind of bind with these pawns here, ready to squeeze a bit more. f4, maybe this f file is dangerous. Knight takes d5, knight takes, queen b7, f4. So can this be allowed? Because f6, that looks crushing. Black plays f5. Now queen e3, getting black to try and fix his pawns. This pressure on e5 is really annoying. Look at that bind on the f6 square. So black's got limited options here. He plays e4, and he's weakened actually this diagonal, if you look at that diagonal. So imagine a pawn here, it's going to be more effective. If a queen especially can come to that diagonal later, it'll be very dangerous. h5, but it's dual advantage, not just for king safety, it's advanced pawns in an endgame. Rook c5, there's enough support at the moment. h6, installing a very, very dangerous fawn pawn, thorn fawn pawn. It really can't be taken. That will strip open black's king bare. g6, but still a fantastic asset now, both for endgame and king safety in the middle game. At the moment, black has a resource rook f7, if you're wondering, going for it. But queen b3 threatens immediately, knight takes e7, double check, rook f7. Now very interesting, fixing the pawns here with a4 using that pin. So more light square control just generally. Bishop d8. And now a kind of overprotection of a central square, making sure this knight's really strong. You know, rook d4. So white's just going to double. And then maybe when the knight moves, d6 could be tortured or attacked. King f8, rook fd1. King f8 gone out of that diagonal. Rook c6. It's clear that white has great compensation for the sacrificed pawn. It seems much easier to play this position. With knight e3, he seems to be threatening to try and win a pawn back now with knight c4. This poor backward pawn, you know, these pawns to be tortured. Bishop b6. It looks as though, hold on a sec, is black going to relieve his pressure if the rook moves back? Is this annoying? Well, Magnus now keeps the pressure on the position by playing a very interesting move, knight c4. He's putting pressure on a5 here, so there's an intermediate move instead of the ordinary. Well, he can't do the ordinary capture, just be losing the exchange. The idea is knight takes a5 with this fork if bishop takes d4. The thing is, tricky position. The knight is also hitting d6. Threatening knight takes d6, forking here. So Wesley takes on d4. Now knight takes a5. Yes, white's got rid of his beautiful knight though. Was it worth it after knight takes c6? Wesley didn't take though the knight. Didn't think that position was good enough. If taking the knight, rook takes d4. Look at this pawn, it's really quite vulnerable and weak. It looks to be dropping off. So white wasn't allowed that possibility. And there's also, it just looks really dangerous. You know, they'll be 3-0 basically there on the queen side for passed pawns. So bishop c5 holding b4. Queen d5 now holding the knight, which supports the possibility now of a5. We've got a running a pawn potentially. Look at white's grip on the position. Amazing grip on the position here. And there's some pretty naughty stuff going on as well. If we look here, I think if black tried something like rook c7, I think it would fall tactically to something like knight e5. Look at that. If the white queen gets to there, this is really dangerous stuff. For like rook d7 later, maybe. It looks like a very precarious position here if the rook moved, and this d8 potential or knight e5 tactics to be aware of. Black played e3, trying to distract with this pawn here. a5, queen b5. Now white's really got a nice position, but now plays a very, very precise looking move, knight d8, threatening mate. Why would a knight just go here though? There has to be more of a reason than that immediate threat. Well, he's got a nice check coming up, juicy check as well. Okay, we see rook a7, and this a file looks potentially dangerous. If black was given a few moves, wants to deliver a mate on a1, check. Now knight d4, seemingly offering a really scary pawn to take with this battery for mating on a1. What is Magnus doing? Queen takes, check. What he's doing is amazing here. He makes way for his passed pawn first with these checks, and now he returns his queen back to base. Not immediately here, because that would be embarrassingly queen a1 checkmate, but first playing a seemingly really terrifying move, c3, because it looks as though the queen and rook are ready to kill here, but the king's got an escape, and it's enough, this escape, if the check. So we see b takes c3, and now check. This is really awkward for black, this check here. Really awkward. The thing is, queen b6 was played. If, for example, king a8, let's imagine king a8, then, believe it or not, this knight is a killer knight in this position after check and check here. There's no way for black to avoid losing material. If king here, then knight c6 check, winning the queen. And the same sort of pattern actually, if rook b8, queen takes, and then we have this beautiful fork, and white's clearly winning, not just the exchange up, this pawn's queening. So not too many options here, and yes, bishop b6, probably white can just play h7 even in this position. Or even still play the check. Let's actually make 100% sure of that. Pardon me. Bishop b6. Either h7. That's pretty strong. Actually, yeah. Okay, so in the game here, very critical position. After queen b6, you know, white's king's not getting mated now. Queen takes b6. And now b takes c3, and this installed advantage for the endgame is really important. This h6 pawn is really important here. It gives white a definite advantage. Immediately white is threatening knight takes f5 to get two dangerous killer passed pawns. So black eliminates that threat radically. So we have this endgame. It looks as though this pawn's scary, but there's always the turnabout maneuver to get behind the pawn with check. So we have king c6, and then the king jumps in to be able to rescue against this pawn, making a lunge for it. Check. It's important here not to play king d3, yes, because of e2, and that would be embarrassing. Whoops. So king d1, keeping an eye on this pawn. Rook f2. Now white really is in a great position here because of this advanced pawn. He plays actually king e1. Have king d7. Now the rook wants to help the pawn, guide the pawn, or get to g7 to get two connected passed pawns if the rook can munch g6. King e6, rook a8, threatening h7. Black parries this with rook h2. c4. Black's really tied up in a kind of zugzwang. here. D5, I mean, it all looks pretty lost actually. D5 H7 is just winning. For example, here, check on A6 would get the rooks off like this, and then this position, C5, the pawn's making a run for it, can't be stopped. So yeah, this is really dangerous on both sides of the board after C4. We have King F7, it's lost actually. Rook B8, black is helpless here. King E6. Now Rook G8 was played, and actually Wesley resigned. Let's have a look at this position. Why is this totally resignable? If King F7, then check. Let's say here, well, in this position, either H7 or Rook takes G6. This looks the simplest to get two connected past pawns. And if here, that's just not there. Rook takes D6. Two connected past pawns is terminal. So you can't really lose that. It's simple, just getting the two connected past pawns. Also, H7 is even winning actually. Well, that's winning as well. Well, White's going to do that and queen that pawn. So yes, it's a helpless position. It's a completely helpless position in the final position after Rook G8. Amazing stuff. Magnus Carlsen's pawn sacrifice, basically in this game, helped him dominate the light squares, have a fantastic grip on the position, and that advanced pawn on H6. During the middle game it was scary for Black's king safety, but in the end game, fantastic asset. Black's e-pawn was put under lock and key, strict surveillance. So this end game position with these advanced pawns is just so dangerous for Black. So an amazing line in the Sicilian here, where it seems, you know, the fight about D5 control, it's been evolved with years of experience of people playing the positions that White can put a pawn there later and later sacrifice that pawn. It's crazy stories from what it used to be, which was just, you know, the simplistic idea of putting an outpost on D5 is replaced with much more advanced stuff now. You can have a pawn there and have a queenside pawn majority. You can sack your D5 pawn for light square control. And here the light square control combined with the king side advances installed definite advantages even for the endgame, as we see in this example game. Fantastic play from the world champion Magnus Carlsen, and puts him jointly in the lead after this round 5 clash. He was in the lead, I think 3.5. So great to see the world champion in great form. Fantastic games. Wesley So is having a bit of a hard time in this tournament so far, but I'm sure he's capable of beating anyone. Okay, comments or questions on YouTube. Hope you got something out of that. Thanks very much.